The front floor section, I've got enough to do a pattern. I've actually got another rotten piece of floor out of one of my spares cars. It's enough when I match the two pieces to work out where the supports for the seats go. That's the main thing. The battery opening there, very large opening. I probably won't duplicate that. I'll look at putting a more modern battery, which will probably be half that size, so that'll have to be changed. So I've got enough to start working at. I've cut the floor out of some very substantial ply, and now I'll use this to work out where the positions for the seat mounts are and these inspection things for the gearbox, and make sure I've got all of the supports underneath. I noticed when I tip this upside down is that it actually does have some additional supports and metal plates underneath, which I assume is to deflect the exhaust. So I'll look at detaching those, maybe cleaning them up, or perhaps even replacing them. So I'll start working on that now. Now this front floorboard's coming along quite nicely. I've put a hole in here for the, which I assume is for greasing the prop shaft, just behind the gearbox. I've cut a battery opening. This stage I haven't put the metal supports around the edge for the floor, for the top of the battery floor. Originally this battery opening came right back to about here. It's got a very large battery tray underneath. I've cut a hole there sufficient to fit a modern battery, and I'll probably have to make some changes to the support underneath on the chassis when I do the chassis, because the modern batteries are a bit higher than obviously the one that went in here originally. Just a few more things to do on this. I've actually done some cutouts underneath, which reflect where the floorboard basically touches, or just touches, the top of the chassis in the middle section there. And I've got to put a couple of supports at the back where the board goes over the just the cross section of the chassis there, to provide more support for the seat. I'll also look at whether I need to provide any other support for the seats, but obviously they didn't have it originally, so perhaps I don't need it. I may well put a support under the centre here, just to take the weight of the seat, but I'll see how it is when I get a bit further on. Now I didn't have this front floorboard section in this car, it was missing, and I used remnants of a floor from another car. Unfortunately that only had half of this this floor section. What I've done is to use that basic template to cut this shape out, and then what I've done is to actually drop this floorboard into one of my other cars has actually got the gearbox in place, because what I wanted to see was, with the gearbox cover, does this cutout actually provide access to all of the gearbox. What I found was that this whole gearbox cover is actually, it's not centralised in the centre of the floorboard. It's a little bit to the left, because it's the way the gearbox sits in. The gearbox actually sits close to the frame here, and on the other side you've got the pedal mechanisms coming down the side. So in effect it's offset a little bit, which means I could have made the mistake of of just using the panel that I had, which finished here, and then just say, well, okay, well, it's the same size, this size as it is that side, but that was in fact a mistake. You can see where it started to actually mark out that way to cut a bigger hole, but it would have been too big and nothing would have lined up. So now it does line up, everything bolts in place, and then it's a case now of working on this front section here. Now the front footrest is actually made up of more than one piece. The very front where the pedals go through, there's the driver's side, that's one piece to there, there's another piece there and there, and then there's the floor section which will come across here and into there, and over all of this gap in the middle is the transmission cover. Now these boards are taken out of 3 different cars, just so I could get an idea of what I've got to make. This one's not complete. What I want to do, I'm not sure how they were, these ones were attached to the front section here, but what I want to be able to do is to have it so I can actually remove this floorboard here and also the transmission tunnel fairly easy in situ. Reason being is down in here are the brake master cylinder, and also obviously the gearbox, pre-select gearbox is in here. Now I want to make it fairly easy to undo the bolts, so I'll probably be putting captive nuts, T-nuts in the floor here, so the transmission tunnel can be removed easy enough, and then look at how this floor attaches to there. Maybe I'll have to put some captive nuts under those metal plates, because I assume the floor here actually goes over and bolts onto that. The reason I say that is there are a couple of holes there which indicate bolts go through, but unfortunately there are no captive nuts under there, so that would mean you would actually have to put a bolt through and a nut, which then means that once it's in place it's very hard to remove this without getting under the car and all sorts of things. So I'll be looking at that when I redesign it. This front section here is laminated, it's quite thick, it's got sort of padding of some sort on the other side there, which obviously is sound deadening. What I'll be doing is I'll be laminating a thick section for the front. As for the sound deadening, I might put it on the inside rather than the outside, and on the other side I will probably put mild steel, which then faces the engine and deflects any heat and also engine oils and so on. So I'll look at that when I'm redesigning this front section. But at this stage I'll start with making a new section in here. Now I've completed the floorboards for the car. This section here for the seats took a while to set up the pieces for the seat runners. I actually had to make 2 new runners because they were rotten, and find the actual position for the seats. And I did that by actually putting the seats in there. So I know the seats will slide into that, and I know the seats when they're in there fit central to the car. The battery box, I've altered the shape or the length of that. It was originally about probably this long, or almost that long, battery about here. I don't need a battery that size in the car, so I've made a smaller battery case which will fit pretty much towards the front of the floorboard. The cover here, which is for the which I assume is for the drive shaft lubrication, so I'll put that in. On this side it originally had a metal plate under the floor with what looked like asbestos, which I assume was asbestos. I've replaced that with a new metal plate which goes about that size, and underneath that metal plate is some compressed cement instead of asbestos. Now that's to actually stop the heat from the muffler, which will sit somewhere in here under the car. So these seats are, this floor section supporting the seats is now fine. All the bolt holes line up, and I've got a whole new set of bolts to go into there. The front section here took a while to fabricate. I didn't have all of the panels. In fact, I actually had to make up the panels from a couple of different cars to see roughly how everything fitted. It's taken a while to fit it properly. This front section here, the board, which actually probably I'll call it a footrest, is laminated to about 25mm thick. Originally it was a sandwich design, so in between those laminations was some form of material, and then on the back edge of that was material as well. I haven't duplicated that process. I've just made this a 25mm thick board. On the outside I will actually put a metal skin where it's inside the engine bay. I'm not going to put cloth on it. Now the reason being is the boards that I did have, the cloth was oil soaked, the boards were oil soaked, and particularly on this side the exhaust comes down through here and the fuel is on this side. I don't believe that wood material, oil and petrol make a very good combination, so I'll be putting steel on the back edge of these boards where they face the engine, so any oil will actually be deflected down and under the car, and any heat as well will be deflected down and under the car. I may end up putting some insulation on the other side there, not sure yet, but certainly on the inside I'll put some insulation, some sound deadening and some heat retardant material. I haven't quite finished cutting out around the steering column and so on. I'm going to leave that until I put the steering column in. So there'll be some final adjustment around here. This will be cut out. Maybe I'll have to cut the top section of the brake pedal out so I can get the brake pedal in. But at this stage it's all in place. Everything bolts in place. There's captive nuts on the back of these, so these can actually just be undone so you can get to the top of the gearbox. So everything is ready to just store away until I'm doing the final reconstruction of the cab.